This human started a bar brawl and ended up a galactic ambassador. Jake Miller rubbed his tired eyes as he stepped off his cargo ship onto the busy docking bay of Taurus Station. After 3 weeks hauling mining equipment through the Orion sector, he needed a drink. Not the recycled stuff from his ship's food processor. A real drink. The station hummed with activity. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved about their business, barely noticing the tall human making his way through the crowd. Humans were still a rare sight this far into the frontier. Most species viewed them as newcomers to galactic society. Primitive, but occasionally useful. Jake's worn boots clicked against the metal floor as he navigated toward the entertainment sector. His broad shoulders and military posture made some smaller aliens step aside, though the larger ones barely acknowledged him. 10 years as a Marine, followed by 5 years as a space hauler, had taught Jake to move with purpose even when exhausted. The neon sign for the Nebula's Edge glowed in 7 different languages, the universal translator below it simply reading, "Bar," for those species whose written language wasn't represented. Jake had stopped here twice before. The drinks were strong, the food wouldn't kill a human, and the owner, a 4-armed Julorian, didn't care about species tensions as long as everyone paid. The door slid open with a hiss, releasing a wave of strange smells, alien music, and the universal sound of beings unwinding after a long day. Jake's eyes adjusted to the dim lighting as he surveyed the room. About 30 patrons occupied various seats and standing areas, representing at least a dozen species. Most kept to their own kind. Jake made his way to the bar, nodding to the Julorian owner. "The usual Earth drink?" the purple-skinned bartender asked, 2 of his 4 hands already reaching for bottles. "Thanks, Morden," Jake replied, sliding his credit chip across the counter. "Been a long haul." Morden mixed the amber liquid with practiced efficiency. "Not many humans come through lately. Trade routes shifting again?" Jake shrugged. "Pirates. In the Cordova Belt. Companies are paying extra for the northern route." As they spoke, Jake's attention drifted to a corner of the bar where voices were growing louder. 3 large reptilian aliens, Vorchons, crowded around a small table where a single amphibious being sat. The small alien's skin glistened with protective moisture, its large eyes blinking rapidly in what Jake recognized as distress. "What's happening over there?" Jake asked Morden quietly. The bartender glanced over, then quickly looked away. "Vorchon merchants, big mineral traders. That's a zealoth they're bothering. Waterworld species. Best not to get involved in other species business." Jake sipped his drink, watching as one Vorchon jabbed a clawed finger into the table. The zealot shrank back, its gill slits fluttering anxiously. Jake had seen bullies like this in every port and on every planet. Sometimes they wore human skin, sometimes scales. Didn't matter much to him. "The zealoth come here often?" Jake asked. Morden wiped the counter with his lower arms while mixing another drink with his upper ones. "That one is new, some kind of scientist. Been taking readings near the Vorchon mining operation in the Krell system." Jake nodded, understanding dawning. Resource disputes were as common in space as they had been on Earth. He tried to focus on his drink, but the conversation across the room grew heated. "Your findings are false," the largest Vorchon hissed, loud enough for half the bar to hear. "Retract your report or face consequences." The zealoth's voice was soft and melodic, even in distress. "The data is accurate. The mining runoff is poisoning 3 major ocean systems. The local species will die." "Who cares about primitive water creatures?" Another Vorchon laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake gripped his glass tighter. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He was just passing through. Getting involved in alien disputes was exactly what his old captain had warned against. The lead Vorchon suddenly grabbed something from the table, what looked like a data device. The zealoth reached for it, only to be shoved roughly back into its seat. "This will be destroyed," the Vorchon announced. "And if you create another, perhaps you will be too." That crossed a line. Jake set his glass down and stood up. "Bad idea," Morden muttered. Jake walked across the room, aware that several pairs of alien eyes were now tracking his movement. He stopped a respectful distance from the table and cleared his throat. Seems like you folks are having a disagreement, he said calmly. Maybe there's a better way to resolve it than threats. The three Vorshans turned toward him, surprise quickly replaced by amusement. The tallest one, nearly 7 feet of muscled, reptilian, looked down at Jake. A human, he said with a sneer. This is not your concern, Softskin. Jake kept his voice even. Just suggesting that destroying someone's property isn't the best way to win an argument. The Vorchan's yellow eyes narrowed. You know nothing of our ways. The Zealoth spreads lies that threaten our business. Not lies, the amphibious alien said, gaining courage from Jake's intervention. Scientific facts. The acidic compounds from your extraction process are silence. The Vorshan slammed a scaled fist on the table, causing glasses to jump and the Zealoth to flinch. Jake took a deep breath. Look, I don't know the details of your dispute, but I do know that threatening scientists for their findings isn't right on any world I've visited. The bar had grown quiet. Even the strange electronic music had been turned down as other patrons watched the confrontation. Jake was acutely aware that he was outnumbered and that humans were considered physically inferior to many species, especially the powerfully built Vorshans. The lead Vorshan stepped closer to Jake, using his height advantage to loom over him. His breath smelled of fermented meat as he spoke. Humans. Always thinking the galaxy works by their primitive moral codes. He reached out suddenly, grabbing Jake by the front of his jacket and pulling him closer. Your species is too new to understand your place. The Vorchan's face was inches from Jake's now. The reptilian alien thrust his snout forward, pressing against Jake's neck in what would be a serious dominance threat to many species with sensory organs in that region. Jake had faced down drill sergeants scarier than this lizard. His response was pure instinct. A quick, powerful right hook delivered straight to the Vorshan's jaw. The alien's eyes widened in shock as he stumbled backward, crashing into a table occupied by a group of insectoid Tricari. Drinks flew everywhere. For a moment, the entire bar froze in disbelief. Then chaos erupted. The other two Vorshans lunged at Jake. He dodged the first, but took a glancing blow from the second that sent him spinning into a Dravak merchant who howled in outrage. The Tricari, already drenched in spilled drinks, clicked their mandibles angrily and joined the fray. Within seconds, old species rivalries and ancient grudges found new expression as the bar erupted into a full-scale brawl. Jake ducked a thrown chair and found himself back-to-back with the Zealoth scientist he'd defended. Was this your plan? The amphibious alien asked, sounding both terrified and impressed. Not exactly, Jake grunted, dodging another blow. But sometimes things need to get worse before they get better. As security alarms began to wail and the fight spread to every corner of the nebula's edge, Jake couldn't help but think he might have just complicated his life considerably. He had no idea just how right he was. This human started a bar brawl and ended up a galactic ambassador. Jake woke up with a pounding headache. He tried to rub his temples but found his wrists bound by energy restraints. The bright white light above made him squint as his eyes adjusted. He was in a detention cell. The human is awake, a mechanical voice announced. The door slid open. A tall, six-limbed alien with blue-gray skin entered. 2 of its arms held data pads while another adjusted what appeared to be a uniform insignia. The remaining 3 limbs remained perfectly still. Jake recognized the species, a Letharian, known for their strict adherence to rules and regulations. I am Security Chief Krex, the alien said. You have created quite a problem, human. Jake tried to sit up straighter on the hard bench. Those Vorshans were threatening someone. I just tried to help. By striking a member of a protected trade delegation? Krex's 4 eyes blinked in alternating pairs. The Vorshan Mineral Consortium is threatening to withdraw from the Galactic Concord over this incident. Jake's stomach sank. Over a bar fight? Over what they are calling an unprovoked assault with possible diplomatic motivations. The security chief tapped on one of his data pads. They claim you were sent to disrupt their business negotiations. That's ridiculous, Jake protested. I'm just a cargo hauler. I was having a drink when I saw them bullying that scientist. Krex made a clicking sound that Jake guessed was the Letharian equivalent of a sigh. The scientist, as you call them, is Zilnara, an environmental researcher whose work has created significant problems for Vorchan mining operations in 3 systems. So they were threatening Zilnara because of research findings? Jake asked. That would be a serious accusation, Krex said carefully. One that would require evidence. A new voice came from the doorway. Perhaps we have such evidence. Jake turned to see a new alien enter the cell. This one was tall and slender with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. 2 long, elegant arms ended in 7-fingered hands. The being's eyes were large and completely black, giving no hint of emotion. Ambassador Thala, Krex said, all 6 limbs straightening in what Jake recognized as a sign of respect. I was not informed you would be joining this interrogation. The newcomer moved with fluid grace. This is no longer a simple security matter, Chief Krex. The Galactic Concord has taken an interest. Jake looked between the 2 aliens, confused. Who exactly are you? The silver alien turned those bottomless black eyes toward Jake. I am Thala, Senior Ambassador of the Galactic Concord's Diplomatic Corps, and you, Jake Miller, have created what we call a multi-species incident of significant potential. Look, Jake said, I'm sorry about the bar. I'll pay for damages. But those Vorchans were, Ambassador Thala raised a hand. We have reviewed the security recordings. She turned to Krex. Please remove the restraints. Krex hesitated but then pressed a code into his pad. The energy bands around Jake's wrist disappeared. The recordings show several interesting things. Thala continued. You initially attempted nonviolent resolution. You spoke calmly. You suggested alternative approaches. Only when physically confronted did you resort to force. Jake rubbed his wrists. That's how I was trained. Escalation of force protocols. Military, Thala noted. Yes, your file mentions United Earth Marines. 5 years of service before becoming an independent cargo transporter. Jake frowned. You have a file on me? We have basic information on all non-conquered species who travel through regulated space, Krex explained. Thala moved closer, studying Jake with those unnerving black eyes. What is most interesting is your motivation. You intervened to protect someone you did not know, who was not of your species, with no apparent benefit to yourself. Jake shrugged. The Vorshans were bullies. I don't like bullies. This simple statement caused both aliens to exchange a look that Jake couldn't interpret. A curious trait, Thala said. Most species would not risk themselves for strangers, especially outside their biological group. The door slid open again, and Jake was surprised to see the Zealith scientist from the bar. Zilnara looked much calmer now, the amphibian's skin a healthy blue-green instead of the pale color from earlier. This is the human who helped me, Zilnara said, voice musical and flowing like water. I request to speak on his behalf. Thala nodded. Your testimony has already been recorded. The Vorchan claim that Jake Miller specifically targeted them because of their species. False, Zilnara said firmly. The human did not know me or my work. He intervened only when the threat became physical. Jake looked at the 3 aliens, surrounding him. Can someone explain what's happening? Am I going to jail for punching that Vorchan? Ambassador Thala made a flowing gesture with her 7-fingered hand. That depends on several factors. The situation has become complex. Krex's data pad beeped. He checked it and all 4 of his eyes widened. The Vorchan delegation is demanding the human be turned over to them for judgment under their legal system. Jake felt cold. He had heard stories about Vorchan justice. None of them ended well for the accused. That will not happen, Thala said with surprising firmness. The incident occurred on conquered territory. The Vorchans are threatening to withdraw their mining rights agreement if we refuse, Krex added. Jake looked at Zilnara. What exactly was in your research that made them so angry? The Zealith's large eyes blinked. My findings show that their current mining processes release compounds that destroy aquatic ecosystems. 3 planets with developing sentient ocean species will face extinction within 10 cycles if the pollution continues. And the Vorchans don't care? Jake asked. Profit margins, Thala said simply. Changing their methods would cost them significantly. Jake leaned back against the cell wall. So I'm caught in the middle of a big political mess because I didn't like seeing someone threatened. Precisely, Thala said. However, your actions have created not just problems but perhaps an opportunity. Something in the ambassador's tone made Jake pay closer attention. What kind of opportunity? Thala's silver skin rippled in what might have been excitement. The Galactic Concord has been observing humans with great interest. Your species possesses a rare combination of traits. You form protective bonds quickly, even with strangers. You have strong notions of fairness that transcend self-interest, and you are willing to act on those principles even at personal risk. That sounds like basic decency to me, Jake said. It is remarkably uncommon in the galaxy, Zilnara explained. Most species protect only their own kind or established allies. Ambassador Thala stepped closer. Jake Miller, I am authorized to offer you a choice. You can face trial for the diplomatic incident you have caused, with an uncertain outcome given the political pressures involved. Jake didn't like the sound of that. Or you can serve as a human representative in upcoming negotiations between the Vorshans and the coalition of worlds affected by their mining practices. Jake stared at them. You want me to be a diplomat? Because I started a bar fight? Because you instinctively protected a stranger from injustice, Thala corrected. And because the Vorshans respect strength. You have shown them humans are not as weak as they believed. This is crazy, Jake said. I haul cargo. I'm not a negotiator. Zilnara's voice bubbled with what sounded like hope. Sometimes the galaxy needs someone who sees things simply, who can call wrong what is wrong without political filters. Jake looked at each of their faces, Krex's four-eyed pragmatism, Thala's mysterious intensity, and Zilnara's desperate hope. He thought about the alternative, a trial where powerful interests wanted him punished. If I do this, he said slowly, what exactly would I have to do? Thala's silver lips curved into what might have been a smile. First, you would need to learn, quickly, about our politics, our history, our ways. Then you would speak for those who cannot speak for themselves against those who would silence them. Jake ran a hand through his hair. This is not how I expected my supply run to end. Sometimes, Thala said, the greatest journeys begin with a single punch. This human started a bar brawl and ended up a galactic ambassador. This is impossible, Jake said, staring at the holographic display filled with information about 20 different alien species. I can't learn all this in 3 days. He sat in a small room that had been converted into a temporary study space. The walls displayed star charts, diplomatic protocols, and historical timelines. Data pads were scattered across the table, each containing information he was supposed to memorize. Ambassador, Thala stood nearby, her silver skin catching the light from the displays. You need not become an expert. You need only understand the basics of each culture. Jake rubbed his eyes. The Zorexians have 15 different greeting gestures depending on the time of day. The Baltorians consider it deeply offensive to show the palms of your hands. The Kirill communicate through color changes and get angry if you wear the wrong shade of blue. He looked up at Thala. How am I supposed to keep all this straight? Perhaps you are approaching this wrong, said a musical voice from the doorway. Zilnara entered, carrying more data pads. Humans excel at empathy, not memorization. Jake leaned back in his chair. Right now I'm not excelling at anything except getting a headache. Zilnara set down the data pads and blinked large, expressive eyes. When the first human ships made contact with my people, they did not know our customs, yet they managed not to offend us. How? Jake asked. They watched. They listened. They showed respect by being attentive, not by following rigid rules. Thala nodded. The Zealoth makes a good point. Your strength will not be in perfect protocol, but in your human adaptability. Jake stood up and paced the small room. I still don't understand why you want me for this. Surely you have professional diplomats who've trained for years. We do, Thala confirmed. They will be present as well. But you offer something they cannot. What's that? Authenticity, Zilnara said. The Vorshans respect strength and directness. Most diplomats speak in circles, never saying what they truly mean. Jake stopped pacing. So I'm there to, what? Be blunt? You are there to be human, Thala said, as if this explained everything. Now shall we continue with the briefing on Vorchan cultural history? The next 3 days passed in a blur of information. Jake learned about the major political powers in this sector of the galaxy. The Vorshans controlled valuable mining rights across multiple systems. They had grown wealthy by extracting resources with little concern for environmental damage. Several, smaller species, including Zilnara's people, were suffering the consequences. On the morning of the negotiations, Jake stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the formal diplomatic attire he had been given. The outfit was uncomfortable, stiff material in dark blue with silver accents that marked him as a conquered representative. I look ridiculous, he muttered. You look appropriate, Thala said, entering the room. The diplomatic hall awaits. Jake followed her through the curved corridors of the station's diplomatic sector. Everything here was cleaner, more elegant than the commercial areas he was used to. They passed security checkpoints staffed by Letharians like Kreks, their 6 limbs, moving with military precision. Remember, Thala said as they walked, you are not expected to solve this crisis today. This is merely the opening of formal negotiations. Then what am I supposed to do? Jake asked. Observe. Listen. Speak only when addressed directly. Thala paused. And try not to punch anyone. Jake couldn't tell if she was joking. The diplomatic hall was a large circular room with a round table in the center. Delegates from 12 different species were already seated. Jake recognized the 3 Vorshans from the bar, looking even more intimidating in formal attire. Their leader, the one Jake had punched, glared at him with yellow eyes. Ah, the human arrives, the lead Vorchan said, his voice a hiss that carried across the room. I did not realize the Concord was now employing barbarians as diplomats. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Thala guided Jake to his seat without responding to the insult. An elderly Baltorian rose to speak. We open these proceedings in the name of peace and mutual prosperity. The matter before us concerns mining rights and environmental impacts in the Krell system. The formal introductions began. Each delegate stated their name, species, and official position. When Jake's turn came, he stood awkwardly. I'm Jake Miller, human, former Marine and cargo hauler. He hesitated, then added, here to make sure everyone gets a fair hearing. The lead Vorchan laughed. A cargo hauler? This is who speaks for them. Affected worlds. Zilnara, seated across the table, spoke up. Jake Miller intervened when your delegation attempted to destroy research data and threatened violence. He has earned the right to be heard. Research based on flawed methodology, the Vorchan snapped. Your claims of environmental damage are exaggerated to harm our legitimate business interests. The meeting quickly devolved into technical arguments. The Vorshans presented their own scientists who claimed the mining runoff was harmless. Zilnara and delegates from other affected worlds presented evidence of dying ecosystems and poisoned water supplies. After 2 hours of increasingly heated debate, Jake found himself struggling to follow the scientific terminology. But he did notice something important. The Vorshans kept interrupting the smaller species, using their loud voices and aggressive posture to dominate the conversation. Finally, during a particularly intense exchange, Jake stood up. The room fell silent. I'd like to ask a simple question, he said, looking directly at the lead Vorshan. If the runoff is as harmless as you claim, would you be willing to drink it? The Vorshan's scales darkened in what Jake guessed was anger. That is not a diplomatic question. It's a straightforward one, Jake insisted. If it's safe enough for the ocean species to live in, it should be safe enough for you to drink. Our biology is different, the Vorshan argued. Then test it on Vorshan tissue samples, Jake suggested. If you're so confident in your science, prove it. The room erupted in murmurs. The Vorshan delegation conferred among themselves, clearly upset by this direct challenge. Thala leaned close to Jake. "This is not protocol," she whispered. "No," Jake agreed. "It's common sense." The lead Vorshan finally spoke. "We will consider such a demonstration for the next session, but this human's disrespect will not be forgotten." As the meeting adjourned, delegates from the smaller worlds approached Jake, their body language suggesting approval despite their different physiologies. "That was unexpected," Thala said when they were alone again. "You turned a scientific debate into a practical demonstration," Jake shrugged. "Where I come from, if someone says something is safe, they need to be willing to prove it." "The Vortians will not forget this challenge," Thala warned. "Good," Jake said, "because those ocean creatures won't forget being poisoned either." As they left the diplomatic hall, Jake noticed Zilnara waiting in the corridor. "Your approach was unorthodox," the Zealoth said, "but effective. For years we have presented data that was dismissed. Today you made them confront reality." Jake smiled. "I'm just getting started." That evening, as Jake relaxed in his temporary quarters, he received a message on his datapad. It was from Ambassador Thala. 3 more worlds have requested human representation in their disputes with larger powers. It seems your Brawl diplomacy has admirers." Jake stared at the message. What had he gotten himself into? This human started a Brawl and ended up a galactic ambassador. 1 month had passed since Jake's first diplomatic meeting. He sat in his new office, which was still strange to think about. A cargo hauler with an office. The room was small, but had a view of the station's main docking area, where ships of all sizes and designs arrived and departed. Jake reviewed reports on his datapad. In the past month, he had attended 14 meetings, helped resolve 3 trade disputes, and somehow prevented a small war between mining colonies. His straightforward approach had earned him both admirers and enemies. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Zilnara carrying several data crystals. "Our friend has arrived," the Zealoth said, voice bubbling with excitement. Jake stood. "The test results?" Zilnara placed the crystals on Jake's desk. An independent laboratory analyzed samples of the mining runoff from 3 Vorchan operations. "The results confirm everything in my research." Jake picked up one of the crystals. "Will the Vorchans accept these findings? They didn't choose this lab." "That is why I asked the Conquered Science Division to oversee the testing," Zilnara explained. "Even the Vorchans must respect their authority." Jake smiled. "Smart thinking." The door chimed again. This time it was Ambassador Thala who entered, her silver skin looking duller than usual. Jake had learned this indicated stress or fatigue in her species. "The Vorchan delegation is demanding your removal from all future negotiations," she said, without greeting. Jake leaned against his desk. "Let me guess, they found out about the independent testing?" Thala nodded. "They claim you have overstepped your authority, that arranging these tests was not part of your role." "My role is to represent those who can't protect themselves," Jake said. "The test results prove the runoff is toxic. What are the Vorchans planning to do about it?" "That is the problem," Thala said. "They refuse to discuss solutions until you are removed." Zilnara's skin paled slightly. "Without human involvement, they will return to their old tactics: threats, delays, denial." Jake thought for a moment. "What if we take this public? Share the test results with all Conquered members?" Thala's black eyes widened. "That would be unprecedented. Diplomatic negotiations are typically confidential until complete, which gives the powerful time to pressure the weak in private," Jake pointed out. "The Vorchans are counting on that." Zilnara moved closer. "Jake's suggestion has merit. My people have suffered in silence for too long." Before Thala could respond, Jake's datapad beeped with an urgent message. It was from Security Chief Krex. "Security breach in Science Lab. Data stolen. Zilnara's quarters ransacked." Jake showed the message to the others. "They're trying to destroy the evidence." "Too late," Zilnara said. "I stored copies in multiple locations." Thala paced the small office. "This is escalating beyond diplomatic channels. The Vorchans must be truly concerned by the test results." Jake stood up straight. "Then we hit them where it hurts, their profits. If they won't do the right thing voluntarily, maybe their customers can pressure them. Careful, Jake, Thala warned. The Vorchans have powerful allies. Jake was about to respond when his office went dark. Emergency lights flickered on as the station's alert system activated. Security breach in diplomatic sector, announced a mechanical voice. All personnel remain in place. Jake moved to the door, which refused to open. We're locked in. Zilnara moved to the window. Look. Below in the docking area, a group of armed figures was entering a small shuttle. One of them was carrying what looked like data storage units. They're stealing the original test samples, Zilnara said. Jake pressed his hand against the door panel. Override. Security emergency. Miller, Jake. Temporary diplomatic code 4730. The door slid open. Jake turned to the others. Stay here, lock the door behind me. Jake, wait, Thala called, but he was already running down the corridor. Jake sprinted through the diplomatic sector toward the nearest access point to the docking area. His marine training kicked in as he calculated the fastest route to intercept the thieves. The station's artificial gravity felt heavy after a month of relative inactivity. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with two armed guards, Vorchans wearing private security uniforms rather than Concord insignia. Stop, one shouted, raising a weapon. Jake didn't slow down. He ducked under the first guard's arm and drove his shoulder into the alien's midsection. The Vorchan stumbled backward. The second guard fired, a pulse of energy missing Jake by inches. Jake grabbed the first guard's weapon and swung it like a club, striking the second Vorchan across the face. Both guards went down, but not before one of them activated a communicator. The human is heading to docking bay 6, the guard hissed into his device. Jake continued running, now aware that he would face more resistance ahead. He reached the main corridor to the docking bays and found it blocked by a security field. Security override, he shouted, but nothing happened. A voice came from behind him. Your codes have been temporarily suspended. Jake turned to see Krex approaching with 4 security officers. Krex, there are thieves stealing evidence, Jake explained quickly. They're about to leave the station. The Letharian's 4 eyes blinked. In sequence. We are aware of an unauthorized departure. However, my orders are to escort you back to your quarters. Orders from who? Jake demanded. From 3 members of the Concord High Council, Krex said, sounding uncomfortable. The same ones who hold mining investments with the Vorchan Consortium. Jake stared at him. You're letting them cover this up? I am following orders, Krex said. Then, more quietly. For now. Jake looked past Krex toward a viewport. The shuttle was preparing to depart. Those samples prove the Vorchans are poisoning entire ecosystems, Jake said. Worlds with developing intelligent life. Are you really going to let them destroy that evidence? Krex hesitated. His security officers looked at each other. We have sworn to uphold Concord law, Krex finally said. Not to protect those who break it, regardless of their position. The security chief turned to his officers. Lock down that shuttle. No one leaves until a full investigation is complete. Jake watched as the officers hurried away. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Krex said. We have just challenged powerful members of the council. There will be consequences. Jake nodded. Better consequences than allowing injustice. As they walked back toward the diplomatic sector, Jake's datapad chimed with an incoming message. It was from Ambassador Thala. Emergency session called. All delegates summoned. The Vorchans have accused you of sabotage and espionage. Be prepared. Jake showed the message to Krex. Looks like our Brawl just turned into a political war. Krex's mandibles clicked. For what it's worth, I believe you are fighting the right enemy. Let's hope the council agrees, Jake said, wondering if his diplomatic career might end even more abruptly than it had begun. This human started a Brawl and ended up a galactic ambassador. Jake stood before the High Council of the Galactic Concord. The chamber was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central speaking floor. Representatives from over 50 species filled the room. At the highest level sat the 9 council members who governed the Concord. Jake Miller, spoke the chief counselor, a tall being with crystalline features that sparkled under the chamber lights. You stand accused of disrupting diplomatic process, interfering with legitimate business operations and inciting conflict between member species. Jake took a deep breath. On one side of the chamber sat the Vorchan delegation, their scales gleaming under the bright lights. Their leader, whom Jake had punched in the bar so many weeks ago, looked smug. On the other side sat Ambassador Thala, Security Chief Krex, Zilnara, and representatives from a dozen worlds affected by Vorchan mining. "I'm here to speak the truth," Jake said, his voice echoing in the large space. "The Vorchans are poisoning developing worlds for profit, and members of this council are helping them cover it up." Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. The Vorchan leader stood. "This human is unqualified to speak in this chamber," he hissed. "He is a cargo hauler who started a bar brawl. His presence makes mockery of our traditions." A counselor with 6 tentacles that waved constantly leaned forward. "The evidence suggests the human has acted improperly. These accusations against council members are especially troubling." Jake looked up at the council. "You have the test results from the independent laboratory. You have records of the attempted theft of those results by Vorchan security forces. What more evidence do you need?" "These matters could have been handled through proper channels," said another counselor. This one with a body made of what looked like flowing gas contained in a special suit. "Proper channels?" Jake repeated. "You mean the channels controlled by those with power and money? The same channels that have ignored the suffering of smaller worlds for decades?" Ambassador Thala stood. "If I may address the council, Jake Miller was given his position because we believed humans might offer a fresh perspective on long-standing issues. Was this not the council's intent when authorizing human involvement?" The crystalline chief counselor nodded slowly. "It was, however, we did not anticipate such directness." "With respect," Jake said, "directness is exactly what was needed. While diplomats spoke in circles for years, people suffered. Entire ecosystems died. Future intelligent species were threatened with extinction before they could even develop." Lead Vorchan moved to the center of the floor. "The human speaks of things he does not understand. Our mining operations bring prosperity to many worlds. Some environmental impact is unavoidable in progress." "Show them," Jake said, turning to Zilnara. The Zealot activated a device. Above the chamber floor, a hologram appeared showing oceans turning toxic, creatures dying, and water sources becoming unusable. "This is not some impact," Jake said. "This is destruction." The Vorchan leader's scales darkened with anger. "These images prove nothing, and this human has no authority to challenge us. He began his diplomatic career by assaulting me. Is this the face of conquered justice?" Jake stepped closer to the Vorchan. "You're right about one thing. I did start this with a punch. I'm not a perfect diplomat, but at least I stand for something." "What do you stand for besides profit?" The chamber grew quiet. Jake looked up at the council. "When I was asked to serve as a representative, I thought it was just to avoid jail time. But I've seen something in these past weeks that disturbs me. The Concord talks about justice and cooperation, but the powerful still bully the weak, just in meeting rooms instead of bars." The gas form counselor rippled. "What would you have us do, human? Revoke the Vorchan's mining rights? Their resources are vital to many worlds." "Not revoke," Jake said. "Reform. Make them clean up their operations. Use some of those profits to restore the damage they've caused. It's not impossible, it just cuts into their margins." Krex stepped forward, 6 limbs moving in perfect coordination. "I submit into evidence the financial records of 3 council members who have received substantial payments from Vorchan mining interests." Now the chamber erupted in shouting. The chief counselor called for order repeatedly. "This is outrageous," the lead Vorchan shouted. "If the Concord pursues this matter, the Vorchan consortium will withdraw completely. Many worlds depend on our resources." Jake looked at him calmly. "No, they depend on resources you control. Resources that belong to all. If you withdraw, others will fill that gap." The crystalline chief counselor raised a hand for silence. "This session will recess while the council considers these matters privately." Hours passed as Jake and the others waited outside the council chamber. Thala paced while Zilnara sat quietly, skin changing colors slowly in what Jake had learned was a sign of deep thought. "What happens if they rule against us?" Jake asked. Thala's silver skin rippled. "For you? Likely deportation from conquered space? For the affected worlds? Continued suffering?" "That won't happen," Jake said with more confidence than he felt. When they were called back into the chamber, Jake noticed immediately that 3 council seats were empty. The chief counselor spoke solemnly. "3 members of this council have recused themselves pending investigation of corruption charges. In their absence, the remaining council has voted." Jake held his breath. "The Vorchan Consortium will be required to implement environmental safeguards on all mining operations within 6 standard months. They will establish restoration funds for damaged ecosystems. Failure to comply will result in suspension of all mining rights in conquered space." The Vorchan delegation erupted in angry hisses, but the chief counselor continued. "Furthermore, this council recognizes the value that human perspective has brought to our deliberations." The crystalline being looked directly at Jake. "We hereby establish a permanent position for a human ambassador to the Galactic Concord." Jake blinked in surprise. "I'm not—" "You have been nominated as the first official representative," the counselor continued. "Your unique approach has reminded us of principles we claim to uphold, but sometimes forget in practice." After the session ended, Jake stood in a daze as delegates from many worlds approached to congratulate him. Zilnara's people would be protected. The Vorchans would adapt or lose their position. And somehow a cargo hauler was now an ambassador. Later, in a quiet moment, Jake found himself back at the Nebula's Edge bar, now rebuilt after the brawl that had started everything. "I heard they named a diplomatic principle after you," said Morden, the 4-armed bartender. "The Miller Doctrine. Something about direct action in defense of others." Jake smiled as he sipped his drink. "Just did what anyone would do." "No," Morden said, wiping the counter with his lower arms. "That's what makes you humans interesting. You think standing up for strangers is normal?" As Jake looked around the bar, now peaceful with species that rarely mixed sitting together, he wondered what other human traits might surprise the galaxy. His datapad chimed. A message from Earth. More human representatives were being sent to join him. Among them, AI, familiar name, Susan Grant, his ex-wife and a diplomatic professional. Jake laughed. From a bar brawl to working with his ex as galactic representatives. Life had certainly taken an unexpected turn. "Another drink?" Morden asked. "Better make it a strong one," Jake replied. "I have a feeling the adventure is just beginning."